you got very good at jiu-jitsu very fast. So you went, I mean, you told the story, blue belt and so on, but you went to black belt really quickly, and not just in terms of ranks, but in terms of just skill level. I mean, you didn't go to black belt nearly as fast as your skill set developed. You were like doing extremely well at a high level of competition. So you're a good person to ask, how does one get good at jiu-jitsu? We talked about solving problems at the elite level, but when you're a beginner at the martial arts, how do you get good? How much training should you do? The very basic stuff, like how much training, how much drilling,
Okay.
and then the mental stuff, like where should your mind be? How should you approach it from a mental perspective too?
I'll just tell you my perspective on this one. I guess I would say I feel step one. I feel lucky to have found a good training situation, particularly for the time. In where I was at, and I drilled a ton. I drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled. And one thing that's really important to understand though is that it I was able to, in a relatively brief period of years, go from zero to reasonably good. But I think I probably crammed more hours in those small years than most people did training, let's say, in two or three times the length. So it may masquerade as something else other than it is. I could
So
say,
you have to put in the hours.
yeah,
There's no way
definitely.
around that.
I think so.
But what did you put in those hours? So when you say drilling, can you break that apart a little bit? Like
Sure.
what does drilling look like? Is there any recommendations you can make?
Absolutely. Step one, I would say your choices matter. Like, I think one of the really important things that I think we should consider about jujitsu is that there's a lot of junk in the system right now. It's like jujitsu is exploded in terms of the number of positions, techniques, strategies, this, that, rule sets. That's really cool on the one hand. On the other hand, there's probably a just metric shit ton of suboptimal things that are out there that are being taught.
Mm.
Myself included, I've taught things that are looking back 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, where I'm like, oh, I would not do it like that anymore. Straight up. Sometimes I wouldn't do it like that. Other times I would literally never do even that particular movement. I don't think the shrimp is a real move. It's it's a giant spiel and it's easier to show in person. But long short of it is, there's a lot of things that we think of as fundamental that I think that are really pretty negative. And also,
That's heresy in jiu-jitsu,
isn't
brother.
it?
The shrimp
Exactly.
is like the holy, we all worship the shrimp.
We love the shrimp. We love the shrimp.
Now, for people who don't do jiu-jitsu, and you should, the shrimp is you scoot your butt away from your opponent.
Yeah, in a
How
really,
would you even describe that?
it's like a really athletic looking position where you look like someone that's trying to stick their butt out on Instagram, and then you
Mm.
push your hands away and you expose your face, and then you lay on your side because someone told you to do that.
And you look like yeah, I guess you look like a shrimp.
Yeah, it's like that time that someone really credible told me to drink unleaded gasoline, and I did it for a while, and then it got to the point in my life where the thing that I needed to do to really improve my life was stop drinking unleaded gasoline.
Yes.
And I would say that there's like a lot of stuff that's in there. That step one is like it's junk. It's actual junk, and not only will it waste your time, it will straight up it will be like an albatross hanging on you because it affects how you think about things going forward. So although it's funny, like the operating assumptions that we work under have a huge influence. You mentioned like growing up in the United States or this being a capitalist society, like woohoo. All right. Now, of course, I think that. I don't really know any different otherwise. And I think that a lot of times people go, oh, communism's better. I'm like, haven't seen it. I haven't read any books about it being better, but it's possible. I mean, I haven't experienced it much myself either. So I can't dismiss it outright. But I guess I would say it's a fundamentally differing operating system underpinning, and all of my choices, if I honestly believed in that thing, many of my choices on a moment by moment, on a day by day, and certainly on a lifetime basis would be very different. So I would say that it's tough when you're young in the martial arts, and I mean all of us are always trying to do our best to learn. But when you're young in the martial arts, you always go, if you're a reasonable guy, what do they call it? Like Dunning Kruger amnesia. I can't remember if this is the right one, but basically you go like, oh, I know what I'm doing here,
Yeah.
so I can say that's not right. But then I read a news story about baseball, and I'm like, I don't know anything about baseball. Sounds credible, and it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But I can't call bullshit. If you're a reasonable person, you can't call bullshit on things that you don't understand. Even if you suspect it's not right, you're like, well, I've got to reserve judgment. you never, ever, ever set aside your need and also obligation to understand why you were doing what you're doing. And don't ask why once, ask why over and over and over and over about the same thing. Oh, well, I want a shrimp. Why? To make space. Why do I want to make space? To get away from the guy. Well, why do I want to get away from him? Well, because he's dangerous. Well, why is he dangerous? And you can oftentimes get down to, wait a minute, I didn't even need to move. 3/4 of the time, you're actually acting in the other person's self-interest. And I guess a lot of times I can't, this kind of goes beyond what we can, demonstrate here. But I would just say, trying to understand what my base operating assumptions are and consistently reevaluate them, which can be freaking exhausting, frankly, and also sometimes confidence destroying. But you mentioned that I did pretty well relatively quickly. I started in 2004, and I was at Abu Dhabi ADCC for the first time as an alternate in 2007. I won a match there against a black belt world champion. And frankly, the fact that I was able to beat someone like that was neat, but at the same time says a little bit more about what jujitsu is and some of the issues with it than it does about how cool I am or was, because that shouldn't really happen when you think about it. You're like, okay, you're a champion at ostensibly a very high level of the sport. You enjoy a 3-inch, 4-inch height advantage and a 35-pound weight advantage, and you just got beat. Like
Well,
that
okay,
should not exist. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. That should not
I
exist. If that
understand.
happens, you're doing it wrong. Is it that I'm doing it right, or is it that you're doing it wrong? And there's enough variance in the way that you're doing it that you're allowing me to win. And now I did happen to win that with the 50-50 heel hook, which was 50-50. But basically, which was one of the early examples of like, hey guys, by the way, people can try to hurt your legs. And that was something like we mentioned John Danaher, we mentioned like, myself, Dean Lister, a lot of the guys from the Henzo Gracie team that have had amazing success. They've gone and done great things. And Craig Jones in the competitive grappling world, basically taking advantage of being very, very good in what they're doing, but also a glaring, glaring, glaring issue with the operating system of jiu-jitsu, which was, a huge vulnerability in the lower body, and not only not attacking it, but having no idea how one does attack it, which means you can't understand how someone will assail you. So anyway, I guess to come back is, if in the absence of knowing what to do, I try to polish what I've got. So if I've got a knife and I'm like, I don't know how to use them, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sharpen the edge and polish it and make sure that when I need to use this dang thing, I'll be able to do it. Because trying to put together a system when you don't have an idea of what's going on, a lot of times you end up making suboptimal choices. But as long as you're consistently reevaluating what you're doing, and that's something I've tried to do over time, over and over and over again, and try to seek out the most the best and also most articulate or insightful instructors or people of various levels. Doesn't matter if they're well known or not, that could say, hey Ryan, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. And I think all I've ever done in martial arts is try to treat people with respect, honestly. Try to demonstrate appreciation for the many, many people who have helped me over time, and be the type of person that they want to train with. Not the type of, because we've all trained with people that make us think about beating the ever loving crap out of them. I never wanted to be that guy. And I was basically saying, like, if I train with a black belt when I'm a blue belt, and this person enjoys training with me, that's in my interest. Selfishly, not only do I not want them to beat me up, but selfishly, I should. You mentioned being decent to other people. You want to incentivize being decent to other people, right? With
Yeah.
the structure of what you're doing. Selfishly, I'm incentivized to be a nice guy, even if I'm internally a scumbag, which I like to think that I'm not. But basically, going like, hey, this guy's way more likely to help me, or this person's way more likely to help me if I shake their hand, say thank you, I really appreciate you helping me out, and but that thing that they tap me with 4 or 5 times, I'm going to ask them about it. And then they don't have to tell me; they're under no obligation. But I'll say, and will they tell me or don't? Thank you so much for your time, really appreciate it. And that's it.
Okay, so to summarize, what you brilliantly described, I just want to make sure we're keeping
Sorry, I
track of
went all
this.
over the place.
No, you didn't. You're pretty on point. But so the first thing is basically, which is difficult. I wonder if we can break it apart a little bit. Is don't trust authority. Essentially, keep asking why.
Be
That
respectful without trusting authority, right?
right. Which is, and then the second thing is be the kind of person that others like training with, or like being around. Sort of being a good friend. So many people just enjoy being around. So one is complete, which is, yeah, you're right. It's attention, which is like completely disrespect the way that things are done. So asking why constantly. One of it is your own flaws and not understanding the fundamentals of what's being described. And then once you get good enough, not understanding, um, like going against the fact that the instructor doesn't understand.
And my
and
inability to understand what you're saying, though, doesn't invalidate it. And that's something like you mentioned, like me mentioning, keeping in mind our own flaws. And then also, again, the flaws that any of us have as the instructor, to your point. And I guess I can speak to being kind of weird. I don't, I like to sit in the corner. But so everyone's a little bit different. Some people, I wasn't terribly popular in high school. I didn't like high school very much. But anyway, yeah, I would not going to be rude to people though. I was never going to bully anybody.
yeah.
If you said hello to me, I'd say hello back. I would hold the door for you if you walked by, and I would just say like simple things like that go a long, long, long way. And that actually takes us back to our social discussion where I'm like, oh man, how do I become great at jujitsu? It's like, well, I'll start by not pissing off this person who can beat the crap out of me and not disrespecting the person who is probably the closest thing to a font of knowledge at that time for me. So, and then recognizing that I should do that for its own virtue because it's the right thing to do and I should try to treat people decently. But beyond that, even selfishly, it's in my interest to do that.
But see, the thing is, this is interesting. Is there's a culture in martial arts, a culture that I like, where the instructor, legitimately so, carries a aura of authority, and it's not comfortable to really ask why. I'm not. It's a skill to be able to have a discussion as a white belt with a black belt instructor of like, why is it done this way, like, and saying why again. Like,
Yeah,
would I mean, it's a skill to show that you're actually legitimately a curious and passionate and compassionate student versus like somebody who's just being an annoying dick who saw some stuff on YouTube. There's a
yeah,
line between to walk there. I just wonder because like it's the drilling thing. I mean, I for example, like when I was coming up, there was so much emphasis placed on like close guard, for example.
mhm,
And you might actually teach me now. I don't know, but to me it was like, why do I need to master the close guard? Like, why is the close guard on top or the bottom? But the bottom really this is the fundamental basics of jujitsu.
who
Like,
decided that?
my body is not. My body says this is wrong. I'm like this. Like, I have short legs, but it doesn't even matter the length of the legs. There's something about me that just I don't understand how leverage here works for my particular body. Like, so it's a feel thing too. Like, it feels like in my basic understanding of leverage and movement and timing and so on, it feels like these certain like butterfly guard or even like half guard, basically every guard except close guard. I can play, I can dance. Close guard feels like you're shutting down like the play that
Is
I
that wrong? Or is that make sure that's what you want because that's almost like an innate characteristic of this guard position, but it's not sold that way, right? It's like,
yeah.
hey, this is a good guard. It's like, hey man, here's a bow and arrow versus and you know how to use this thing, right? Like make sure you're far away and like up on a hill or something. Because you could take that bow and arrow, run up on something and try to use it. But if nobody told you not to do that, and they told you it was foundational, it's very foundational, it's very important.
To everything else too, right?
That's back to the shrimping thing. How many things are we taught
That's
that even if it's not, let's say itself is not a garbage thing, might be effectively garbage. You could give me a Ferrari, but if I try to make it fly, it's not going to work. If you're like, here's a plane, here's another plane, here's another plane, here's another plane, here's a Ferrari. I'm like, oh, it must be a different type of plane. Like you could be forgiven for leap if we're going there.
yeah.
Like, oh, maybe the wings come out or you just go fast enough that's like a bullet. I'm like, you can make these crazy leaps in your mind, and people are doing that all the time.
Mhm.
So if you don't provide the context for me, or worse yet, you provide improper context, like how much of a problem is that going to be?
Well, I think the skill of the white belt should be just be nice. But so in the complicated human space of when your intention, at least on the in the big picture view, is good, there's the question is it's not always when your intention is good, the actual implementation of it is good. So you might be just almost, and that's much. It's not the case for you. It's much more the case for white belts. They don't even know their intention might be good, but they don't know all the lines they're crossing, all the
Right.
so they're not actually able to and like interpret all the ways in which They're being totally insensitive to the requests of others, like
Right.
explicit requests of others. So your job as a beginner is to be a really good listener of those social cues of
It's
all
like
the
a visitor
different.
in a foreign country, right?
Yeah.
Like you're a representative of people that look like you, people that talk like you, people that have your passport, and you're like, man, I'm going to go over here. Oh, I've got my foot up on my knee. Well, if I was in certain countries in the world, that's rude. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But can you imagine if someone says, hey, I really appreciate if you take your foot off. That's pretty rude. And then I want to tell them, well, not where I'm from, man. I'm in your house. I better, again, I may go that
Yeah.
direction, but let's say I could get away with that. Now I'm a bully. And if I can't get away with that, well, I'm about to maybe be on the wrong side of something. But I guess, yeah, like you said, if we have positive intention, that's fine. But I also have to recognize who I am. And I think that that's one thing that I tried to do and continue to try to do over time. Like oh man, hi, I'm the one that's asking for a favor here. If I spar with Raymond Daniels is doing me a favor. I ain't doing him a favor. Let's not get it twisted. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. These are not, and this is not like some affected nonsense. This is serious. I'm like,
Mhm.
thank you. If I spar with Stephen Thompson, I'm the one being done a favor. George St. Pierre takes his time to spar with me, which he has in the past, and not even kill me, which is really, I appreciate that because that's why I can sit here. George is not a prop for me to get my rocks off or see what's going on. And also, I'm going to do that and then expect him to just take it. And I've seen he's a gentleman. I've seen people get nuts with George and have him just be like, he's a patience of a saint.
Yeah.
I don't have that level of patience, but I would just say to come back, figuring out like, hey, so what role am I here? And that comes back to like at least what I see people on the internet. Yeah, man, I have a beef with Joe Rogan. You're like, no, you don't, Ryan. You're some goof.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm some random dude. Joe, like people they almost want to like elevate so that we can somehow be level. We're peers here. If I go into Faraz Zahabi's gym, I am not a peer of Faraz Zahabi. I am a student of TriStar. I am a guest in the academy.
Yeah.
And if Faraz asks me for something, short of him like, telling me to try to do a triple backflip so I break my neck, the answer is yes, sir. I can do that for you, Faraz. No, man.
Yeah.
And no worries. And hopefully it should come with, I guess, a level of graciousness. But I guess that's kind of one of the things that I see nowadays with how accessible people are. Because I grew up, being a big, huge base sports fan of all kinds. I couldn't send Derek Jeter a message and much less have a possibility of a reply. And if I do, it's like, I have people send me messages. It's very nice that people send me messages. Some people, again, and not everyone is coming from the same place. But I've had plenty of things that are like, yo, dude, I need you to do this for me. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what's never going to happen. That I have no idea who you are. And that was how I was addressed. And I don't need, oh man, you're the greatest, one, because that's weird. And two, because I'm not, but just, hey, Ryan, how are you doing? Hey, do you think you could do the following if you get a second? I'm like, if I get a second, you're dang right I can. Why not? It's easy ask. But it started with some level of politeness. And I guess like that's maybe being semi-Southern. Like I grew up in Virginia. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Like that goes a long way.
And there's all different kinds of implementations of politeness. I mean, most of the successful people I've met, it's been surprising to me how much of you mentioned peers, like I could think of Joe Rogan. You mentioned Joe Rogan, but Elon Musk, they don't they almost treat me like I'm the superior. You know what I mean? Like it's not even it's that's the politeness. Like that's the approach. The feeling of it is like I'm the student, I'm the beginner. I'm like approaching a situation like it's almost like method acting of like you're better than me. That's how I approach a lot of interactions. Like I have something to learn from this, even if it's like a young.
Do you think that they're ungenuine?
They're totally genuine.
But isn't that a funny thing? Like, in
Yeah.
spite of who they are, they're incredibly genuine because they respect. Correct me if I'm wrong. They respect you, obviously, for what you bring to the table. But also,
No, they approach everybody like
but
this.
that's what I. I'm sure they respect for what you bring to the table. Beyond that, though, they're treating you with dignity as a human being.
Yeah, as a human being.
Which
that's right.
And when they could probably get away with treating most people without a whole heck of a lot of dignity. And I guess what does that always say that like, again, like you can always tell someone of quality because they treat the king and the janitor the same way.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's what we're seeing a lot. Like, I guess I don't mean to like to nitpick, but that's where I would take issue, I guess, a little bit or disagree with.
Are you going to criticize with the internet again?
No,
people on the internet.
Old man yells at clouds. But anyway. But I guess what I mean is just like the way that people address each other because it's so casual now.
Yes.
And it's great. On the one hand, it's nice. On the other hand, you go, hey, why can't am I somehow am I worried about diminishing myself? It's like the way that I'm sure that people talk to women sometimes. And where it's, hey, what's up, girl? Oh man, she's a bitch.
Yeah.
versus like, how am I? That was supposed to get a good response. What
Yeah.
what about that was going to elicit a
Yeah.
favorable response? Versus being anything other than just, yo,
Well,
man, what's going on? And I guess that does that make any sense?
no,
And
it makes total sense. And that southern thing that you're referring to, I feel like that's an important part of human communication.